Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. Today, I'm talking with a high school English teacher. Per usual for Make EdTech 100, we cover a lot of ground. We dig into the kids can't read, quote unquote, narrative and whether our reading tests are actually measuring the kind of reading kids do every day. We also get into how she handles student AI use in an AP English classroom. She walks us through how she decides whether tech in her classroom is actually helping or just there for the sake of being there. And we land on a debate I get in my TikTok comment section a lot, whether teaching kids to use technology responsibly is even a teacher's job in the first place. This is episode 9 in our ongoing screen time series, so if you've been following along, this episode fits right in. If not, it also stands on its own. Lisa Snow is coming up on her 20-year anniversary in the English language arts classroom in Washington State. And somewhere along the way, she became the person her school and district turned to for guidance on AI, as well as teaching ELA. She's a national board certified teacher, an ISTE certified educator, and she's led her district's AI principals committee while also presenting on AI to principals and teachers nationally. Welcome, Lisa, to Make EdTech 100. I named the podcast Make EdTech 100 because the meaning is open to interpretation. So we can get to know you a little bit better. Tell us, what does that mean to you?
I think of the top 10 lists and, ranking. But then I also think of my son is super into Pokemon Go. And when you get a hundo or 100 Pokemon, it's the best stats ever.
Oh, okay.
So it's like you get a hundo and everybody gets really excited and it's very rare. So that kind of goes, to the gaming world a little bit as well. I think this idea of how we can kind of put tech in a place that's maxing stats almost, or pushing, our kids or our students or our teaching, the learning in our classrooms and our school buildings kind of to that full stat level, as opposed to something that is just draining or distracting or kind of causing problems, I guess.
That's why I asked that question, because everybody always has a different answer. Every time it's something different, how they interpret this idea of making it 100. And that is a new one, the Pokemon element. I love it. You can tell you have an 11-year-old in your house.
I do, and he's a Poke nerd in so many ways. He is the co-president of the Pokemon Club at his school.
Oh my God! I love that his school has a Pokemon.
He is the founder and co-president.
Wow. Okay, so he is very into Pokemon. But I had an episode a few episodes ago about game-based learning, and I interviewed Jackie Gardy and Dan Ryder, and Jackie made the really good point that Pokemon cards are filled with reading and they emulate so much of the real world. Learning how to interpret where to find information on the card is very similar to learning the layout of a book, for example, or the layout of a magazine or the layout of a newsletter. I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, I'm an English teacher, so whenever I'm anywhere, right, people figure out I'm an English teacher and then they have questions about the state of kids reading in the 21st century, because of course the thing we bemoan constantly is that nobody reads anymore. And I'm like, they read. They just read different texts than we're used to reading. These kids can read these kids can read a TikTok video better than I have ever seen anyone. The nuance, the detail, even just the way that they read, body language, they're just a lot more visual in the reading, visual texts, less linguistic texts in the same way, but they can read. If they see an Instagram post they can read who's tagged in the post, who's not tagged in the post, like the social context. They can read what's said in the caption, what's in the hashtags, what's not in the hashtags, what pictures were selected and what pictures weren't selected. Is there a song? Was there not a song, right? These multimodal kind of things. And they read those so well. Their vibe understanding of like image is insane.
You're completely
Yeah.
right. That's such a Gen Z and Gen Alpha thing. But yet, older generations, they look at it and they go, it doesn't look like it looked when we were their age. They're not necessarily reading out of a textbook or a physical book. Maybe they're reading on the Kindle app on their phone, or they have a Kindle, or, yeah, all the examples, TikTok video, all the things that you just said. It looks different, but they're still reading. And as you were saying that, I have never thought of this before. But all we hear about is test scores, right? Test scores are down. Kids can't read. The amount of times I've been in meetings over the last year, year and a half, 2 years even, that I've heard, oh, well, kids can't read. Why are we doing that when kids can't read? And that's the catch all phrase for why formal education is failing. Kids can't read. I'm like, hey, I was just thinking, I'm like, is the fact that our reading test scores in general, of course, stereotypically, like generalizing across the board, are not as great as we want them to be because we're having them take these standardized tests that look exactly the same and are testing them on a different type of reading. What's your thought on that as an English teacher?
So I'm an AP teacher, so I literally prepare my kids for a standardized test every year, but I'm also at a
Okay.
private school,
Is
so I
that all
don't,
you teach is AP?
yeah.
You only
So
teach AP? Oh,
I
okay.
used to teach, so I've taught pretty much every level of English in the high school, ninth, both honors and what we call CP, college prep. When then I've taught 10th, both honors and CP. I have taught 11th grade. I've taught regular 12th grade, honors 12th grade, AP Lit, AP Lang. So I've kind of taught the gamut. But right now, my teaching load is about zero point 0.2 or zero point 0.4 in the classroom. So I teach AP Lit. Next year I'm teaching at zero point 0.4 in AP Lit. And then the rest of my FTE is in EdTech. So
Oh, okay.
I support the teachers with tech platforms. I do backend for our LMS. I help with AI and policy and kind of leading initiatives. I actually just got an email from a student, Mrs. Snow, I want an AI club. Will you be my advisor? And I was like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
okay.
great.
Well, let me like reply to you in a second when I have a breath on my summer. But yeah, but
Yeah.
they're,
I
the
love that they're
kids,
emailing you on their summer break asking
yeah.
for a club
This
too.
kid is
That
really
says
sweet.
something.
Yeah, he's really sweet and very into AI. He was helping with the investing club that I uh, told everyone that I would sit and be the adult in the room for, but I had no expertise in any way, shape, or form in the investing club. But they created their own game app, and I think they used vibe coding through AI platforms to help do that. And so these kids are like, it's amazing to see what they can create in order to kind of do the things that they're really interested in doing, even at the ninth and 10th grade level. Yeah. So
Interesting.
okay, so you were asking me about
So
standardized tests.
yes, so yeah, so you teach AP
Loop
English
around.
currently. So
Yes.
yeah,
And so
your whole job is to prep them for that AP test and to
yeah,
pass that AP test
but what I
essentially.
like about the AP test, I mean, everyone has their own questions about AP and college and the high school and all of those kinds of questions. I don't want to get into that. But what I like about the AP test for English is that really it's not about them knowing very detailed facts or things that I have to make sure that they've memorized. It's about teaching them skills. So I have to teach them to analyze literature. So they can read anything I want them to read to prep, because the test itself is more about how you're reading and analyzing what you're reading. But it's all written text. So it's all literature in that kind of sense of fiction. But when they take the test, they have one essay that the kids can pick any work of fiction that they want to use for that essay. It's the Q3 on their free response questions. And it's really interesting as a person who reads and scores the test, how many different texts the kids select for their work of fiction. There's just such a range. There's video games that they pick
Mm.
sometimes, memoir, which isn't technically a work of fiction, but it's creative. They'll pick movies, they'll pick television series,
Mm.
they pick comic, manga, they pick
Anime. I'm sure there's some anime
anime.
in there.
We did have a YouTuber, one of his
Oh,
videos picked this year, which was, I
yep.
think, my favorite thing to read. So, the kids kind of pick the range for that one. But it's not what the test is like saying. They say work of fiction. But the kids kind of pick whatever they want on that. So it's interesting to see what the kids see as kind of works that they feel confident enough writing about or excited about.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
not necessarily a fiction novel, which is what our brain thinks of as older people when we hear a work of fiction. It's a YouTube video, it's a anime clip.
yeah, and some of the kids do a really good job with, non-typical literature, right? Things that are kind of more wide ranging, right? Like we think of like comparable, like the test used to say comparable literary merit. And because they give a list of novels or plays that the kids could pick from, but they don't have to use the list. The list is just there to jog their brains if they get stuck. But it's interesting, the kids who pick something they're passionate about, they usually do pretty well in terms of their ability to analyze and argue, which is encouraging. I like to see that because I'm like, okay, here's a kid who's passionate about something, who's thinking deeply about it, who's trying to make claims and support argument with evidence, which is exactly what we want them to be able to do. And they're using a text that matters to them. It doesn't matter to me if it's like my jam. Right? This is about them analyzing the text in their world. And some video games have super complicated, complex, really interesting narrative arcs that I think could be classified as literary work in a lot of
Video
ways.
games
They're
and
really
board
thoughtful.
games. There's some
Hmm.
incredibly complicated board games out there. My husband and I like to play board games, and I have had to before, and I'm a very strong reader. I read the instructions of the board game and I have to go find a YouTube video to interpret parts of it. There's so many complex elements to this strategy game that I can't comprehend it just by reading. And I'm
Or
an
like
adult.
even simple ones, like we have some friends who got us into Wingspan. Have you ever played Wingspan?
I have wings, one of our
So,
favorites.
so again,
Very
not
tons of
super,
reading.
yeah, not super complicated in terms of the narrative, but
Uh-huh.
it literally has a YouTube channel that it
Yes. Actually,
created for its how-tos, and
I
we
think
played at the,
Wingspan was one of the ones that I had to go watch a
yeah,
YouTube video on to learn
yeah.
how to fully
So
play.
we got it and started to try to play the like tutorial version, and we played it completely wrong. I full stop. But then we played it with our friends who had played it a lot, and they walked us through it, and then we're like, okay, yeah, we were playing this completely wrong, but we really had a great time. So then now we're a little bit like, okay, we can kind of start to think about the nuance of it and the strategy around it. But yeah, we had to play it a couple times and with people who knew what they were doing to really get our heads around it because the directions are so complicated.
So complicated. But that's
Yeah.
another example of the Wingspan cards are not as complicated as a Pokemon card, I don't think, but still pretty complicated. There's a ton of information on that card. And by the way, my middle niece, she was probably playing Wingspan with us when she was 10,
Ewan
I
plays,
would
my
say.
son plays it with me, with us, and he loves it. And he's all into the strategy. You can see his little gaming brain, trying to figure out how to get this. And he's got a goal. And then when somebody messes up his goal, he gets really mad, but he's doing all the prioritizing, which is really good for him because as a kid, he has ADHD. So EF skills are always that kind of big thing with his
Yep.
kind of brain, but this is like so many EF skills in a game, and he is developing a lot of that prioritization and pivoting and flexibility and kind of all of those pieces that he needs to continue to develop. Even a kid with a typical brain in
Yeah.
11 is going to have EF needs, but you add on to that the layer of like diverse attention
Yep.
kind of realities.
For
And
sure.
so it's it's really fun. But yeah, I mean kids are reading. So, I mean,
Kids are
I
reading.
also am not a
I
huge
love.
fan of state testing, but I understand why we have it. I'm in a private school, so we don't have to use it.
So yeah, so you don't have the state testing, but you do have
No.
your AP testing.
Yeah. I feel like we are testing reading in a very limited manner. And I think
Mm.
they need to be able to read words on a paper. They do. They need to be able to use written language. Yes. I think one of the other things that we did to some extent was we focused historically within the last, what, 20-ish years, maybe 30, focused on decoding and less on comprehension. And I think the science of reading is kind of pushing more towards that comprehension end as well as decoding. So I think some of it may also be a little bit of that figuring out just because they can sound out the words doesn't mean that they're retaining the information. And then just because they're like reading by sight almost and understanding the word by its shape as opposed to its decoded phonemes, I guess, doesn't mean that, they need both. And I think sometimes the pendulum kind of swings, and that may be part of why test scores are looking the way they are. But
I love that. Something really important to think about. Our test scores, especially reading test scores, could one reason they're low be that they're outdated. The way that we're testing is outdated and not matching the world that Gen Z and Gen Alpha learners are operating in every day. I'm going to take that with me. It's a really good thought. I want to kind of open the window to your classroom. Walk me through a typical day in your
ooh.
classroom. Like if I were to walk into your classroom on a typical Tuesday or Wednesday, what would it look like? What would you be doing? What would students be doing?
Well, so it depends. So our schedule is kind of a weirdly modified block schedule. So I have some days where it's a 50-minute class period and then some days where it's a 70-minute class period. And a 70-minute class period, we're going to do a little bit more kind of projecty or like things will be moving around a lot more. In a 50-minute class period, we can really do kind of one like core thing and then a warm up and kind of a wrap up. One of the things I noticed on the test is that they were scared of poetry. I don't know, I noticed this
Mm.
7 or 8 years ago. Just because the kids don't really think about poetry as something that they see every day, they get really intimidated by it. So we do a poetry warm up every week. The kids both love and hate it. So they on their course surveys, they always tell me they're like, "I want to do less poetry warm ups. What's the one thing that helped you prepare for the test slash read better? Poetry warm ups." It's the same kid will say that. They're like, "I don't want to do them, but they help me the most."
But they
So
That's
we
such good
read,
self-reflection though that they can see that. That
yeah,
even though I didn't want to, I know why we're doing it and that it
yeah.
helps me.
And I do them kind of two different ways. So I think I got this from the National Writing Project, but they, at some National Council for Teachers of English conference, they had a session on this thing called unwriting, where basically they label using colors pieces of poetry or writing to kind of get a sense for what's essential, what's the authorial craft that's happening in the reading. So we do poetry warm up using that, where I have the kids mark punctuation that stands out to them in red and diction or words that stand out to them either because they don't know them and they have to look them up or because they're weird or interesting or forming some kind of pattern in green. And they mark figurative language, so similes, metaphors, imagery in blue, and then something structural in purple. And that can be like sentence structure, poetic structure. There's a lot of options there. And then I have them do anything else they find interesting in orange, which is optional. And then they have to kind of use something they marked to create kind of a thematic statement that's rooted in something the author chose to do. And we do that every week with a different poem. Then we also have a poetry warm up that's a little different style. So that's for the kids who want to start in the weeds, in the details. And then we have one where we work the other side, where they start by saying what's literally happening in the poem, and then they try to identify the speaker of the poem, and then they work towards that thematic statement. So starting kind of at a more macro level, and then we have a micro option. So we usually start with that. So we read poetry every day, and we do something with it every day. And those tasks can be like spread out over the week. So we're not having to do it all at once, but they all can be bunched up if scheduling doesn't allow for them to be spread out. We'll do some sort of retrieval practice. So, tell me two things you remember from what we talked about yesterday. And then we'll talk through that a little bit just to kind of keep that science of learning piece about retrieval and calling things that happened. Sometimes it'll be in the form of a reading quiz because they had reading due. And that usually looks like, tell me about this one kind of more thematic thing that I want you to think about as you read, and then tell me what confused you and why it confused you, and try to answer your own question. So I don't do quizzes that are like multiple choice. I do quizzes that are looking for them to have shown that they struggled with the text, whatever the text is. And then we have some sort of discussion, activity, work around like visualizing something in a piece that we're working with, character analysis, and those are usually done. I seat them all in like little pods. So they seat in groups of 4. And so then those look like things they're doing with their table groups. Sometimes table groups will work together. Sometimes they'll work separately. Sometimes they're online. Sometimes they're on paper. Sometimes they're getting up, moving around, and interacting with each other's stuff on paper. Giant sticky notes are my friend. I love giant sticky notes.
Look what I
I
have right
love,
here.
yeah. Oh no, like the big, like
The big.
the
Oh, yo,
human
you like
size ones.
big, big. Oh
The
yeah, I
big
have those
ones
in
that
this
look like,
closet right here.
yeah, that look like posters. Yeah, so we have a bunch of those. Our English department loves those. And I often will have a table group, right? They'll read something, a text, and then I'll ask them to kind of start thinking about as a group, how would you make a thematic claim? And then how would you support it? And then they put it up on the walls, and then the other kids walk around with the pens and comment or add ideas or try to give feedback. So it's almost like a mini peer review of an outlined essay that's not a full essay. Or we'll do it with, like, when we read Frankenstein, we made an argument around whether Frankenstein is a tragic hero. So does he have hamartia? If he has hamartia, do we define hamartia as a mistake or a flaw, because those are very different. So then we talk a little bit about what's the difference between mistake and flaw and how do we pinpoint it, because the translation from the Greek could come, we've always said fatal flaw for hamartia, but the Greek actually is more around a mistake. So it's interesting, that tension. And so then they'll debate via post-its and these big post-it notes on the walls. And then sometimes we'll do that via 4-corner activities where the kids are up moving around. So lots of movement, lots of kids talking to each other, lots of decentering me. Sometimes they'll be doing mini research projects, getting ready to do a quick 5-minute presentation of what they researched. So you'll see me walking around talking to them as they're researching, and they're like, can I use this? And I was like, well, that's the Google AI overview. So if you want to use that, you need to click that. See that link right there? That's their source. So you're going to go verify that information in the source. And then I get the kids that are like, wait, I clicked the source and it looks like this source is just a blog written by AI. And I was like, so can we use that? Probably not. I was like, this isn't horrible information, I don't think, but see if you can go find it somewhere where a legit human wrote it. And they're like, okay. So a lot of those conversations happen kind of organically as I'm walking around the classroom, because I think even my 12th graders who were 17, 18, they're not always aware what those links mean at the bottom of a Wikipedia page or a Google AI overview or any of those things. And so the more that I can be like, yeah, no, that's the source. That's where it says it's getting the information. So go verify it. The more I can do that organically as it happens, the more I think it solidifies for them good practices for a world where you just can't avoid AI.
Yep.
Does that, I know that wasn't one lesson, but that's kind
Yeah,
of
no, I that's great.
what
Those
we do
Google
every day.
AI summaries are so problematic in so many ways. And I've heard from a lot of teachers that because of that, they aren't having their students research because it is so problematic. You just gave the perfect example of a teachable moment that we can't get around it. Doing a Google search is literally a part of life. They're there, so let's teach them that they tend to be riddled with hallucinations, unfortunately. Where they sit as of today in June 2026. That could easily change next week. They could improve
Yes.
it. But as it sits today, and teaching them how, the other thing I've noticed is if you just look at the summary when it pops up on the search, it's pretty terrible. But if you click, it's like show me more or something like that. And you go to the page that's just the summary, for whatever reason, it tends to be a lot better. And then it has an opportunity for you to chat with Gemini and ask questions. And like you said, teaching them how to then go find the source and verify it and all of the things. That's what we have to be doing as educators with people of all ages, instead of just saying, oh, this is here, this is terrible, this is making them give me terrible sources in AI slop and hallucinated AI slop, so we're not going to touch it.
I mean, and that's the reality. There are adults making AI crap on the internet. There are adults who are letting AI read their emails and then send emails back. And those emails are like incomprehensible because they didn't check the work, right? There are also adults, I think, even in the teaching profession, who are using AI to help them assess student work or doing all these other things. And they're not checking it. They're not taking ownership of it. And one of the things that we put in both our policy for students and policy for teachers as a school around AI is that you are responsible for any content that you put your name on. Full stop. So if you're not checking it, you're responsible for whatever it says. And so if you send something out that is slop and not correct, that's how you're presenting yourself. And so we just have that conversation a lot. That doesn't prevent the kids whose frontal lobes have not fully developed from doing what people whose frontal lobes have fully developed do, right? They are going to do it still. But it's like these constant organic conversations. Anytime I see a kid in the hall on ChatGPT, because our school hasn't banned entirely on campus, I just ask why they're there. What are they doing? How are they using it? What are they thinking about? And a lot of times they're trying to study. They're trying to get clarification when their teacher's not available because, we're humans and we can't be in two places at once. I had a student who was trying to study for a calculus test and he was getting frustrated with ChatGPT because it wasn't giving him the process that he learned in class. It was giving him a different process, which was then confusing him. He was 18, so I felt comfortable offering him a different option because he wasn't in that age where we're really careful. At 18, he can make choices about his own personal identifying information. But I was like, have you tried Notebook LM? And he's like, no. And I said, so I showed it to him and I said, you can upload your notes. And he's like, what? And I was like, do you have your notes? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, take this page of you writing, put it in there, and then ask it to help you with sample problems based on this process. And he's like, okay. And he's like, oh my gosh. Now it's giving me the right problems. When I walk through the process, it's showing me the process that I need to study using my notes, like my work. And so it's like one of those things where, if you're asking the kids, he wasn't trying to like have it do work for him. He wasn't using it in the way that is inappropriate, but he was getting frustrated with the reality
He didn't have the right tool.
Yeah. And he didn't
And
know.
you gave him a better tool.
Yeah. But he didn't know how to use it in a way that really helped him use it. So just because he was on ChatGPT didn't mean he was cheating, right? Or circumventing his learning. And so I find just stopping and asking curious questions and then not making them feel like I get kids that ask me all the time when they find out that I'm the like EdTech AI person on campus. They're like, do kids get to use AI for your class? And I was like, well, it depends on what they're using it for and what the context is and why. And they're like, what? And I was like, it's not a yes or no here. It's a, what are you using it for? Why are you using it? How are you using it? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes I want your brain, just your brain. I don't want anything else. Sometimes I want you to have something that pushes you to think more deeply and brainstorm. You're doing a review assignment. You've already read the text. I'm just asking you to compile a study sheet for each other because you've got a test coming up. So yeah, you can start that draft in AI. I don't care. because I know you already read it. So, and you can verify the information that you're getting from the AI. So, like, it's always a depends kind of question, but they're always a little surprised when they hear from me, it depends. It's not a yes or no. But I want you to be thoughtful and intentional about it and not just default to AI.
Well, my guess is why they're surprised is that there's so many teachers in general, but especially English language arts teachers like yourself
Yeah.
that have taken a absolutely no AI or going back to paper and pencil.
Oh,
One, they've taken that extreme end,
yes.
not the nuanced, it depends, let's land in the middle and be a centrist perspective. So I'm sure people are surprised to hear from you, not only as a teacher, but as an ELA teacher, especially, and as a high school AP English teacher,
Yeah.
to say it depends.
I think there really is place for, I mean, because really back, I don't know, feels like a lifetime ago, but back in 2022, when prompt engineering was a really big deal, less so now, but with the agentic AI and all the things that are coming out. But I think still prompt engineering becomes something you still want to be thinking about. But back when that was like the big skill, I started having my kids use AI image generators on Padlet because it was free essentially and it didn't collect their data as much, right? Because they didn't have to log in. But they were using AI image generators to visualize poetry, like images and poetry, or metaphors and similes, like the two subjects within a metaphor, the thing that we're describing and the thing that's being compared to it, right? I'm not assessing whether they can draw. I don't care how artistic they are. So I really want them to be playing around with, how do I tell an AI to create an image that I see in my head and use language to describe what I'm visualizing to get the visualization to be created from this text. And so for me, that was developing their writing skills and prompt engineering, but also their ability to read and think about often poetry. And they then were playing with AI. And it was kind of developing a reading skill and like a writing skill, but they got to play around with AI to do it, which they always were like, "What? We get to use the AI?" I was like, "Yes, use the AI." But I think that's, again, that's where you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater all the time.
Yeah, that's a great example of you were using an amazing tool that works super well in school and classroom learning environments, Padlet, big fan. And you were teaching them AI literacy by getting them in and having them see, like, this is what AI has the capability of doing. You're also teaching media literacy, right? Because a huge part of media literacy now is understanding that everything that you see isn't real. And AI can really, really trick you in thinking that something's real when it's AI generated. So yeah, great example. I love that. On that note, you've given some good examples of how you're doing no tech activities with giant post-its in your classroom and markers and highlighters. You've given some good low tech examples. You've given some good high tech examples like using AI image generation. How do you approach tech to support learning and engagement in your classroom without it getting in the way and being a distraction? What's that line for you as an ELA teacher?
It's not perfect. And sometimes you do stuff and you're like, crud. Like now they're all trying to watch some sort of anime that they really wanted to watch from this morning. Or they're all trying to jump on and do different homework for a different class. So it's not perfect. Our school has a policy around cell phones where the kids have a cubby that they have to put the cell phones in when they walk into class. And I don't give them an actual cubby number, but I tell them at the start of class when I take attendance, I'm like, hey, there's 15 of you in the room and I only have 14 cell phones. Somebody stick a cell phone in a cubby. No shame. Just walk up and stick it in. And they do. And I have to be a little bit more adamant about that the first few weeks of school to kind of get them to kind of
Get them in
just
the habit.
naturally stick it in there and just move on. I have a couple kids that keep trying to bring gaming systems in this year. So I had
Oh,
to kind of nix
like
the gaming.
Xboxes?
Like the
Like
little, like not the Switch,
like
but they're
Nintendo Switch?
similar to the Switch.
Okay.
Yeah. Where they would bring
Interesting.
them with them. Yeah. They're adorable. I love them so much. So,
They
but
try so
yes.
hard. They try
And
so
I just
hard.
would be like, dudes, no, thank you. Not happening. No, no. So I just have to be really aware of those kids and that kind of stuff and be kind of clear about what is expected and not expected. But I would say my first question whenever I'm thinking about should we do this on tech or on paper is kind of thinking about what's the purpose of the technology. We have an LMS. I do a lot of quizzing via the LMS because it's just easier for me to grade that way or score that way because
Yeah. It's
they
all
do
built
it.
in.
It's all built in. It's
Yeah.
already in, we're on Canvas, so it's already in SpeedGrader. Sometimes when I'm gamifying a reading activity or a retrieval practice, we do it on whatever it is now. Wayground is what it's called, I think now.
Mm-hmm.
What quizzes became.
Yep.
Um, so we do it on Wayground. Sometimes if we're doing like a quick retrieval study kind of thing, we'll do that race to the top activity, which they think is hilarious. And, you know, they have a good time with that and I get them engaged. So I will do stuff on tech that way. But really, I could do that on paper. It's basically the same idea. And so it's like I have to really think through on certain aspects, like, why am I using the tech versus is it tech for tech's sake or is it tech that I think helps them do better? Like we do a timeline project with Frankenstein where they have to take the monsters story and Frankenstein story, which happen simultaneously but aren't told simultaneously in the book, and layer them together. They could do that on paper. It's easier for them to do that on Padlet. And it actually works a lot better on Padlet because they have a lot more activity. They can all be on the same place. I suppose you could do it on Canva too, like a big whiteboard. But what I like on Padlet is they can move around, right? They can put all their date, like their 10 events in, and then they can work with. So I divide them into two teams. They've got like Team Frankenstein and Team Monster. And the monster ones put all 10 on there, and the Frankie ones put all 10 on there, and then they have to bring them together and figure out when they happen collectively. And they can drag and drop. They can move them around. They can talk and be like, no, no, that happens here. Okay, well, that happened here. And they can have that conversation and be moving them around. For me, that is so much easier than trying to do that because the
With
kids are going to get
notes and
frustrated.
index
Yeah.
cards. Yeah. And then you only have 70, maybe 70 minutes. They don't finish it. Then they come back the next time. They have to get everything back out, lay it back out again, versus just logging into Padlet and boom, it's
Yes.
there.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, I can, with Padlet, I can really restrict tools or I can, you know, add more tools. So it's less distracting to some extent too. So I'll do a lot of that where it's like, I'm really thinking about what's not just what's easy for me or what's flashy and cool, but also what works well for them. Even when I do seminars, which are kind of the mainstay of an ELA classroom, I would say for most of the humanities, seminars are pretty core, like a Socratic seminar. I get students who, you know, they're quieter or they're absent. And so we will have a no tech seminar where everybody in class has their book, they have themselves, and they're just talking. But I will use a digital recorder and I record it. And then I have a back channel because I divide the class in half. So I do an A seminar and a B seminar. And anyone who is in the opposite seminar is in the classroom listening, but they have access to the back channel where they can add ideas or comments as they're going. They can be like, oh, yes, I found that quote that they couldn't find. It's on this page. And they can post it in a back channel, which is all in Canvas. I do it as a Canvas discussion. And then any kid who's absent, they have a recording of both seminars and they can still participate by listening to the seminar and offering their ideas. Because I think the other thing with seminars is when kids are absent, they're often left out of the participation points for that day or whatever. And that can be a little frustrating. And so this still holds them accountable for participating in some capacity, and engaging with the discussion that we had, even if they weren't in class. So I just try to be really thoughtful about, I guess my big thing as a teacher is just to always be thoughtful and intentional with what I'm choosing to do. And I have my days where I'm not thoughtful and intentional, or I'm not as thoughtful and intentional as
Everybody.
I would like to be. There are days where I'm like, we're watching the new Frankenstein movie. Because you're all second semester seniors who have checked out after the AP test and you're tired and you just need a day to just be, and you're all 18 at this point, so fine.
But hey,
uh
that's super purposeful too, because there are kids in your class that could pick up things from the movie that they didn't pick up from reading, or maybe make connections. Maybe they needed that visual of the movie to make a connection that they didn't make when they were reading the book.
it's
That
funny
multimodal experience.
yeah, and it's funny too with the new one, the oh gosh, I always want to say Benicio del Toro, but that's not the last name of the that's the actor, not the director.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't come
Yes,
up with it either, and
it's
I'll
not.
just
It'll come
Google
to
it.
me at some point. But with the new one, it's very not the book. I mean, it is, but it's
Mm.
also not in a lot of very clear ways. Thematically, I think it does a really nice job, and it's beautifully done film. But I had kids, we were watching it, and one of them's, wait, Elizabeth is his adopted sister that he's known from birth. What the heck? And I was like, yes, Elizabeth is in the film, but she's not the same Elizabeth as the book. And they're like, this is weird. They're
Del
like, he did.
Toro. That's the director, Del Toro.
Yes, but it's not Benicio. His first name is not
Guillermo? Guillermo?
Guillermo. Thank you. Yes, I keep.
Make sure I
Benicio is the
pronounce that right.
actor. Guillermo is the
Yeah.
director. Yes, thank you. I knew that was not correct, but I had the correct last name.
But you're giving the perfect example of another learning opportunity there to talk about different interpretations of the novel in different mediums,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. So
And
it's interesting.
artistic creation, artistic individuality.
Yeah. So I mean, we had conversations with it, but I have days like that too, where I'm just like, hey, I'm feeling like we're a little behind on our reading. Let's have a reading catch up day. Y'all just, we're going to read all day. And they're like, okay. Because sometimes a school year is long and it is a marathon sprint. So you get exhausted pretty fast. And I think there's just space for that sometimes. And then the kids also, they love, it's always a little weird for them when I'm like, we're not using your computers at all today. Don't even get them out. And they're like, what? But then they kind of are like, oh, this is kind of nice. I'm not feeling like because they use tech in so many classes on so many things. Because we have a digital notebook program that the kids use for a lot of classes where they're doing a lot, like their math homework is almost entirely on OneNote, essentially,
I was
which
gonna
is a
ask, is it OneNote? Okay. Yeah.
Microsoft product, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't use OneNote anymore. I used to. I use Cami now for annotations of smaller works because I can integrate it with Canvas and it works basically the same way. A lot of our math program still uses OneNote, and so the kids are constantly on OneNote with their notes, with their homework, with all of these things. So we're constantly on screens at school. And I think it's really refreshing for them. I think this is partially why the kids really like science labs when they do the labs, because they're like doing something that's hands on and not on a computer. They're literally cutting open something or dissecting something or watching for a chemical reaction, or when they can go and do a walk your talk or a four corners activity where they're talking to each other and debating, but there's no screens anywhere. I mean, the kids really like it. And I think it's a refreshing difference. And so I think the more that kind of reality happens for them, I think that it's good. It's good to have
You
built into
just
their day.
gave such great examples of how lumping everything and calling it screen time is missing so many nuanced perspectives of how you use technology. You gave the example of building a Padlet timeline. You gave the example of using OneNote for math. OneNote's great for math, by the way, if any math teachers are listening. You gave the example of watching the movie Frankenstein. All three of those are very, very, very different uses of screen time and devices. And very different than students scrolling YouTube Shorts or TikTok or so any social media platform on their phone. But the current conversation is lumping that all together and saying that all of that is bad. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a couple questions I usually ask because I have an 11-year-old. So his summer rule, which is why he popped in before we started recording and was asking, can he do something, is technically he's not allowed. Like, he gets up earlier than we do because he likes his alone time in the morning, he says. But then the minute I get up and come downstairs, he's not allowed games, YouTube, anything until afternoon. And he has 3 things he has to do before that. And he's not allowed to ask for screen time before noon unless he before noon, and he's not allowed to ask even if it's afternoon if he hasn't done the 3 things. And if he asks and it's before noon and he hasn't done the 3 things, then he doesn't get it for the rest of the day. And then we start again the next day, which I did not invent. My director of curriculum and instruction, who is a very good friend of mine and also a wonderful parent who is careful about screens with her kids, that was her system. But it's been working really nice, because we have a screen time battle constantly, right? And he often will say, "We're different, Mom. I'm not the same as you. I use screens because it helps me like calm down. It helps me decompress, helps me connect with my friends." And he's not on social media. He doesn't have a smartphone. He has a watch. So he has group chats and he
Okay, I was gonna
plays
say, so
like
yeah, so how is he connecting with friends, like text messaging?
Fortnite. They
Oh,
play.
right.
They
Yep.
can talk to
Okay.
each other when they play,
Okay.
which
Yep.
he's decided, is kind of just the same thing over and over and over again. So he's kind of off Fortnite right now.
Mm.
But they'll get on and play Minecraft together, and they can all connect and talk while they're playing. They'll chat with each other while they're playing together. He and one of his friends who used to live right near us would meet in the park to play Pokemon Go, but they would be on screens playing Pokemon Go, but together. And so it was a way to connect. So he constantly reminds me that my understanding of screen versus his understanding of screen is different. So I think that's the first thing that I always want to kind of think about is what's the screen for? What's the screen mean to that kid or that student? Do I see harm or do I see help, right? Connecting with his friends when we go to I teach at a private school and he goes to school with me because I get discounts. So,
Yay! Teacher discounts on
discounts
tuition.
on tuition, right? So, a lot of his friends don't live in the neighborhood. He can't just run outside and go play with
Mm,
friends all the
right.
time. So he can connect with them over longer distances via video games and screens, right? The other conversation I have with him often is this active? And this is the same thing I think about with my students. Is this an active engagement or a passive engagement? When he sits and just watches some YouTube shorts, that is passive. And I want him to be thinking about, and he's got, you can tell he's my kid because Mom, this is so AI generated. This is ridiculous. And so we look at it and I'm like, oh, that's about right. Because I constantly have these conversations with him about, well, everything on YouTube is not accurate. It's not true. He's like, Mom, did you know blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, yeah, did you verify that? Because that does not sound right. He's like, well, this person said on YouTube. And I was like, yep, go verify it. Figure out if you can find the answer. And he's like, okay. But like, you can tell he's my kid because we have those conversations. But he knows that YouTube, is just this passive consumption. When he's playing MLB The Show which is one of his favorites, he's currently into the World Cup. So he also plays the soccer FIFA video game. That's a lot more active, right? He's thinking, he's strategizing, he's getting frustrated and working on emotional regulation. There's a lot that he's doing there that's more active. And so I think that's a difference that you want to be thinking about. I think doom scrolling social media, I would say limit the crud out of that. Constantly absorbing YouTube shorts and TikTok videos, like we need some limitations on that to some extent. But I think engaging with even watching a movie with family and talking through that, or watching a movie at school and talking through that. Even looking at YouTube videos that are thoughtful and we're engaging with them and having discussions around them, playing games with friends online. I mean, I don't think we should stop eating and stay in our room for 24 hours, like that kind of stereotypical like World of Warcraft guy in the early aughts, right? Which may or may not have fully existed all the time. I feel like that's more problematic, but I feel like the kids are using screens differently. And sometimes when my son is feeling sad or his emotions are heightened because he's got ADHD and that emotional regulation piece is challenging, just watching a few YouTube videos or like some gamer who's doing a walkthrough on YouTube, like calms him down. And it like lets him kind of tamp out for a second to come back and feel more regulated. So I think there's just different realities for our kids than there used to be. And yes, we shouldn't just sit in front of the TV all the time. But how many parents and adults do that all the time? There's a reason why we have this like mass consumption of what is it called? Binge watching, right?
Yep.
And
Streaming
sometimes we
services allow you to do that now. Just
well,
watch one
and
episode after another, after another, after another. You watch the whole series or the whole.
yes. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think we are all guilty of that. And there's a time and a place for it. Should you be binge watching your entire life? No. But at the end of a school year, those first couple of days when I'm home from having taught for a full school year, yes, I'm sitting in front of the TV and I am vegging on the
Shutting off your
couch.
brain. Yep.
Yeah. I don't even know what is it. They call it couch rot now. I
Yeah.
call it vegging, but like I'm becoming a vegetable on the couch. But yeah, couch rot away. You've earned it.
Your body
Ye-
and your mind need it
Yeah.
sometimes to just relax, check
And
out.
my kids, at least in a private school in the Seattle area where we've got very affluent families, not everyone, but a lot,
A
and
lot.
very overscheduled kids who are involved in everything, whose sports practices sometimes don't start till 7 p.m. and they get home at 10:30, right? And they've had a full day of school and sports and music and all the other things they're involved in. They get tired and there are just times where they need to rot for a second and turn that brain off. And that's, neuroscience. I remember there was a neuroscientist that said kids and humans need to stare into space and be bored and just completely staring off into space for 20 to 30 minutes a day at least, just because it lets our brain calm itself, it lets our brain think creatively, it's good neurologically for us. And so I think sometimes we forget that in kind of I often am worried more about overscheduling than I am about screen time. So, I don't
Interesting.
know.
Yeah, from a parent perspective. Yeah. And then we wonder why these kids are scrolling TikTok or YouTube shorts or other social media platforms or looking at Snapchat stories because that's potentially not always, but potentially is their binge watch, their way of letting their brain check out. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, it looks different than adults couch rotting to shut your brain off and let your mind and body rest. Yeah, that's interesting. You just gave so many more great examples of how this is such a nuanced conversation. It depends on what you're doing. It also depends, like you said, on the person and what they're doing on that screen, what they need to do to regulate themselves. It might involve some type of screen or device or tech use, whatever it may be called. If there were to be Washington State or your district were to set some kind of screen time restriction, saying and everything is lumped under the same category, like we can only use it X amount of minutes per day or per week, what effect would that have, both positive, negative, on your classroom and your school? Because you're working with other teachers on tech integration as well.
So we're a one-to-one school. So every kid's required to buy either a Surface or a laptop, and we tell them which ones to
Oh,
buy.
so it's like BYOD, so they have to bring.
No, we have two that they purchase,
Oh, okay.
that they
A
own.
Windows laptop or a Surface.
Yes. And
Okay.
we provision it, like the our IT department provisions all of them, gets them all
Okay.
set. They're on our like Azure client and all that kind of stuff. But the kids technically own the laptop or the Surface. And so they bring that to school every day. So having restrictions on that would then raise a big question, I think, around what does it mean to be one to one? Why are we having them purchase this? As someone who is a parent who just had to buy one last year,
Mhm.
they aren't cheap. The warranty is very nice on the laptop. So I just dropped my sons off for a summer refresh where they'll kind of fix any damage or anything, and it's free because it's warranted. So I think our school does a really nice job with the warranty, but I think it would just raise an interesting question around why one to one? Why do we
Mhm.
have all these laptops? Why did we move to every student with a laptop versus a cow? We used to call them cows, like computers on wheels.
Mhm.
And they all had very funny cow names like Bessie and Dolly. But
Okay.
yeah, but I think there's also, I mean, I teach at a private school, so we have, generally speaking, a much more affluent clientele than I would say your average public school. But even in the area I teach, the public schools, there's very affluent with families that have a lot of accessibility to technology and those technology skills. I mean, I'm literally in Seattle, so Google, Microsoft, Amazon. I mean,
Amazon,
it's the
yeah,
tech. I mean, I think it's probably second only to Silicon Valley in terms of
for sure.
tech in the US. But we also have families that don't have great Wi-Fi at home, who don't have a separate computer. Like the only computer the kid has is the one they had to get for school. We have kids who are on, really big scholarships, who have things that are subsidized. And for them, this is the only time they get as much of this exposure to like positive tech use versus doom scrolling on your phone. And so I think the more that schools can be intentional about tech use and screen use so that kids are getting positive understanding of how to use these tools, how to be healthy with them. I have conversations with my students about notifications on their phones every year, which is just mind blowing to them. I'm like, you realize you're the human and it's the computer, right? And they're like, what? And I was like, you can turn every
Turn it off.
notification off on your phone. And they're like, what? These little buttons annoy the crud out of me. I was like, yeah, me too. So I
No,
turned them
nobody's
all
ever
off.
showed them how to turn off notifications?
No, a lot of the time they haven't. So I tell them, and I tell them about focus apps. I'm like, if you want to spend a couple bucks, Forest is a great focus app. You can build a tree and it forces you to focus and not look at your phone. And they're like, what? And they just like look so amazed that there are these built-in tools that they can use that don't cloud them with the clutter of all of these push notifications, banner notifications, buttons, like all of those badges and things. And I'm like, just turn off all the things, and then if there's something that you miss, turn it back on. You also can pick which notifications you get. So if you don't want those stupid little numbers in the top corner for how many emails you have, turn that off. And then you can still click and check your email. I mean, I don't, my work email is on my phone. It does not notify me ever on my phone.
Oh my gosh, that would drive me absolutely bonkers if I got any type of email notification on my phone.
I mean, my Gmail, my personal email, it will, but my work email, no. I have to actively go in and choose to look at my work email because I don't want to be notified at 9:30 p.m. that someone emailed me because frankly, that will keep. And that's the other thing I tell students. I'm like, a lot of these notifications, they're there to trigger you to engage because the goal is eyes on the screen. So if you aren't bombarded with all that noise, then you can be more intentional about using things effectively. And thoughtful and in making your own personal choices. And I think that's the number one thing we want kids to be doing, is learning how to be adults who make choices for themselves that are healthy and positive. And I think what's happening with kids is that they're not, those conversations around you're the human and it's the computer aren't happening as organically, because you can give them a lecture on all of the personally identifying information, intellectual property, social media is unhealthy that you want. They're not going to absorb that unless you're having an organic conversation with them about their thoughts, right? And engaging them with kind of that, you're in, and I would say the younger kids it's harder, but by the time they're in middle school and high school, you can have these conversations with the kids, and you can have conversations around, when my kid gets upset about screen time, I'm like, dude, every time you are kind of starting to obsess over a video game, you're going down this obsession rabbit hole, this is what I see you doing. This is why I'm limiting you, because I don't want this. And we can have that conversation. And I think that's, the more that that is happening both at home and at school, I think the better it is. And so if we just say no screens, period, then I think it's gonna limit those conversational moments. And I think,
Teachable moments.
yeah,
Just teachable moments.
I think phones and social media are different than laptops too. And so I think there is really a place to differentiate, right? Some schools are on iPads, some schools are on Surfaces. We have laptops as well. But I think that even as an adult, my laptop is very different than my phone. It's a lot easier to get sucked into mindless scrolling on my phone than it is on my laptop. And so I think even just saying all screen bad is going to be problematic. I think there needs to be nuance. We can't say yes, all bad. Kids are anxious. Screens make them anxious. All bad. I don't even think Jonathan Haidt is saying that. I heard him interviewed on Hard Fork when that Anxious Generation book came out. I don't even think that he was saying all screens bad all time. He was differentiating between the doom scrolling, social media, mindless absorption versus engagement with a screen, like watching TV with parents or having conversations around things. He was differentiating. I think popular media then goes, and then we lose the nuance. But I even think the author of some of these conversations wouldn't even say throw everything out.
Interesting. So every time I post a clip from this podcast on TikTok, especially, where we're talking about, is banning cell phones the right thing, or talking about the screen time debate or something like that. Usually it has to do with cell phones. I get bombarded with comments saying that is not a teacher's job. It's not a teacher's job to teach kids how to use their smartphones correctly. That's a parent's job. You just gave an example of how you are teaching them things like, hey, did you know you can turn your notifications off? Oh, wait, no, I didn't know that. So what are your response to that? As a high school English teacher and someone that works in a high school, what's your response to those people that are saying our teachers are overwhelmed already? This is not their job to teach students how to use technology responsibly and healthfully. Healthfully?
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 Healthfully. I think healthfully.
Helpfully. We'll go with that. The English teacher saying helpfully. We'll go with that. I like to make up
Healthfully.
words. So
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. English is an organic living language, so words get made up all the time. I mean, Riz didn't exist until like 2 years ago. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't disagree. I do think it's the parents' job. But I don't know that all of our parents feel equipped to have these conversations, have the time and bandwidth to have these conversations, are actually having these conversations. I think we're all kind of subjected to, right, the doom scrolling temptation. I'm guilty too. Sometimes I'll be like, man, where did the last 20 minutes go? oh crud, I looked at Instagram and I lost 20 minutes of my life because I just kept scrolling. I mean, we all do it, right? And so in those kinds of intentional conversations, there is so much noise for parents right now, just as much noise as there is for teachers. And a lot of teachers are parents. So then you get the double noise, right? So I feel like I hate the phrase, and I'm going to say it, but I hate it. It takes a village, right? I mean, what is our village anymore? We're so disconnected from that idea of a community space. It does. And while it is not my first job to teach children how to use their phones appropriately, it impacts them as a whole person. And it is the point of education and the point of compulsory education as we see it in a democratic society is to create citizens who are capable, thoughtful, engaged critical thinkers who can participate in democracy in a healthy way. So I'm teaching them English. Literature does this beautifully. It teaches them to think about the world from a different perspective, to hear from other voices, to consider other ideas, to ask important questions, to recognize that there's nuance and difference in the world, that there's value in your intrinsic humanity. All of that's coming from literature. You can get it in a lot of disciplines, but essentially literature teaches that. It's beauty, it teaches wonder, imagination, right? All of those are about literature, but they're also about being a full person, a whole human. And I think this is why I enjoy teaching where I teach at a Catholic school, where that is kind of an undergirding idea. But I think it's the heart of all education, public, private, right? The idea is that we are molding humans, and that is both a parental job and we've also said that part of that is this idea of compulsory education from K to 12 to mold humans. This is why we have discipline expectations. This is why we have, conversations with kids around choices that they make where they make mistakes, like they decide they want to vape in the bathroom. This isn't about being punitive. It's about talking to them about their health. And they're like, this is why we limit when kids can smoke, when kids can drink. Those limitations aren't necessarily about just being punitive. They're about helping people grow into full functioning members of our democracy. And so, yes, it's the parent's job, but I think it is also a teacher's place. They're partners with children in their education. They're partners with parents of minor children in education. We're not just one isolated silo. We're all a team. And I would love to see us work collaboratively with every kid. Some parents are better about that than others. Some teachers are better about that than others. Some school districts and school administrators are better about that than others. But ideally, we're all on the same team. And we're all trying to support this little burgeoning human to becoming a good person, right?
Super well said. I have very similar thoughts on it. One of the things that I try to stress to people that I'm not sure a lot of people have really ever stopped to think about. You said that the purpose and goal of formal education is to create productive members of society that can participate in our democracy. Where do most people get their information of what candidates they're going to vote for? Social
Oh,
media.
yeah. Well, and I would say right now, my husband actually said to me, was it yesterday? I don't know. Within the last week, my husband's, I don't think anybody of our generation or younger watches the news anymore. And
No,
I was like, yeah, no, who watches the news?
I
Nobody
have this
watches the
conversation
news.
with people all the time. It becomes incredibly obvious to me when I either go visit my grandparents or they come visit me. My grandma will be 90 in August. My grandpa just turned 87.
Okay.
And from as long as I can remember, in the evening, they watch is it the 5 o'clock news? I believe it's 5 or 5:30 news, maybe 6 o'clock news, whatever it is. And they watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune.
Yep.
And they still to this day. So when I go to their house, that's the routine. You sit and you actually watch the news. And last time my husband and I were there, we were both kind of like, news? What's news?
What
And then
is
when they come
this?
here, we don't even have live TV. So it's always a struggle when 5 o'clock hits. My grandpa's like, news. Where's the news? Got to turn on the TV. Where's the news? Because it's an 87-year-old habit of his, right? And we have to figure out how to get to even the live TV on our TV because we don't do that. Yeah. So most people, even our age, I think we're about the same age. I'm an elder millennial. We get I get my news from social media. I'll admit,
Yeah.
different social media channels. But now I'm watching my favorite morning routine now is while I'm getting ready in the morning in the bathroom, putting on my makeup, brushing my hair. I open my phone, I open TikTok, and I go to PBS News channel. And they have these really good, anywhere from a minute to several minute clips from their PBS News hours. And it's fantastic way to get caught up on the previous day's news. It just
And
happens to be through the medium of TikTok.
yeah. When I'm driving, so like during my commute, usually, if Ewan's in the car, my son, because he commutes with me now, he likes to listen to music, but sometimes I force him to listen to podcasts. And so I'll listen to like Up First from NPR,
Yep.
The Daily from the New York Times. I like Hard Fork, which I'm often like, it's helping me keep up with tech stuff. Plus, it's funny.
Mhm.
But then, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on Saturday mornings, we'll listen to because it's funny, but it's also the news of the week. And then, stuff pops up on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I haven't drank that Kool-Aid yet. I'm still fighting fighting against it. Short form videos, I'm not sure I totally understand. I like funny reels, but I
Oh,
haven't
love
gotten
it.
into informational reels yet. But if I see something on social media, I'll often go to the app of the New York Times or Seattle Times, which is kind of our local newspaper, or I'll go like CNN or, kind of things, or and I'll Google for something about it. But yeah, I don't my mom, who's in her mid 70s, is an avid news watcher, and my son was there at their house a couple days, and all he wanted to do was watch the World Cup. And so when he was gone, she was finally like, I can watch the news again. And I was like, who watches the news? But she does religiously every day at 5.
Yeah.
She watches the news and she has her favorite news channel. But I just feel like it's, anybody I think under the age of 50 is not watching the news. They maybe read the newspaper if they're kind of someone who enjoys that, but for the most part the TV news is all in snippets that's consumed on social media.
So yeah, considering that, like, I just can't. I know. I'm in schools all the time. I'm in classrooms. I know teachers are more than overwhelmed. You're burdened with so many things. I know it,
Mhm.
but I can't get my mind wrapped around the thing that gets cut is technology and teaching the healthy and responsible use of it at the same time that we're having a conversation about the fact that it's unhealthy and issues that it's causing, and knowing that most people are getting their, especially voting decisions, from social media.
Yep.
Like, that's literally the basis of our democracy. Of all things that can be cut, why is that the thing that is on the top of the chopping block right now? I just have a really hard time with that. I don't disagree that there are things that need to be taken off of a teacher's plate. 100%. I think for the sake of humanity, that technology can't be that thing that's taken off. It's got to be something else. I know way too much about how this technology works, and I know way too much about how these big, huge billion-dollar businesses that control our society, let's be honest, control our government operate. So why would we take that out of formal education and just not educate people about addictive algorithms? And you said something really great earlier about how understanding that this is meant to suck you in, depending upon the app that you're using. But if it's likely a social media app, it's been developed to suck you in. Why would we take that off, and why would we not have that conversation with students?
Yeah, I think sometimes, and maybe it's because my brain just, I think I'm undiagnosed, so this is probably not accurate, but I also, having a child with ADHD, see mirrors of my brain in his
It's
brain.
genetic.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that I also have it, but I'm like the high functioning girl ADHD. So, I learned to mask it really young
Yep.
and figure it out. So, but my brain shifts really fast. It's just a part of my brain. So I understand that as a teacher, I can downshift pretty quickly to organic conversations about tech and other things. And I understand not everybody does that well and is comfortable with that kind of rapid movement of topic. So I get that. Everybody's a different personality. And I think that can be some of the fear is, I have to take attendance, I have to grade and score, I have to, care about whether their emotional health is healthy and watch for signs of, neglect, abuse, suicidal ideation, all of those kinds of emotional things that we all are watching for as teachers constantly because we care deeply about our students, because no one would go into teaching if they didn't love students. It's just not worth it. The money is not worth it. It's hard and challenging. And we're worried about content, and the content gets getting more complicated, and the kids and discipline and all of the things that they start bringing into our classroom that are challenging, right? So there's so much to be thinking about that's overwhelming. I get it. But I think those organic conversations about being a good person, being a healthy person, whatever those look, are essential. And they do present themselves. There's space in not formally providing lessons, but in relationships with your students that offer those moments, right? And I think if we're just taking opportunities at those moments to have these conversations, I think it's worthwhile. And it isn't I don't think it's a huge ask. It doesn't have to be every kid in your room with a formal lesson. But if all of us are having those organic conversations with students as they come up and taking those opportunities, then we should be able to talk to most of our students, right? Because I think as a school, we're always, at least my school, trying to think about who in our building doesn't have a trusted adult to go to if they need it, right? We are constantly thinking through, here's our roster of kids, you know, we want every kid to have an adult that they feel comfortable with coming to if there's some need. And we actually think through like who doesn't and how can we connect with those kids and really give them the opportunity to feel like they belong and they're valued and that we're intentionally seeing them as a person. I do think that's hugely a part of our jobs as schools. I don't know.
Agree.
Maybe that's too much.
No, I agree. All right. How can listeners connect with you?
It's so funny. I'm like the most analog tech person on the planet. I have a paper calendar. I guess maybe my LinkedIn is probably my better option.
Okay,
Reach out
great.
on
Now,
LinkedIn.
Lisa's know
It's
LinkedIn.
probably,
We'll put a link in the
yeah.
show notes for that.
Okay.
Awesome. We end every episode with a Make EdTech 100 moment. This is
Oh,
just the last thought that you want to leave people with.
be intentional. I know that's more work. I know that's hard always. And we fall short. We're humans. We F up. That's what we do. That's by definition. I always tell my students, if you're making mistakes, you're perfectly human. So you get to be
Broad
perfect as a human.
creatures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a human. That's what we do. We make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And you are perfectly human if you make mistakes. So now you're perfect. Yay. Because that's what my students all struggle with, which is perfectionism. But thinking about what you're doing before you do it is really important in a classroom, especially when we're talking about technology, screens, growing young people into, participants in democracies that we want to see, who are critical thinkers and thoughtful engagers in culture, who are going to build the world that we want to live in. That we can't be mindless. We can't just go into rote. We have to be intentional as educators, even though it's hard. And I think most of us want to do that. I think it's always just a nice reminder to be like, just because Sam Altman says that AI is inevitable doesn't mean the way he sees AI has to be inevitable. just because Mark Zuckerberg says Instagram's the best tool, for connecting people out there, or, Threads or whatever his Twitter alternative is the best option, and we can't do it without these ads and this algorithm, doesn't mean that's right. So you don't have to take what they say at face value. You can push back. You can think critically. You can be intentional. Just because they say this is how it should be used doesn't mean that's the best thing for you or your students or your kids. So I guess intention.
Love it. Thank you, Lisa, for
Yeah,
joining us and spending time on your summer break, sharing. I appreciate you.
of course. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.